Welcome to this special episode of Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. With the long-awaited release of the Barbie movie, directed by Greta Gerwig and co-written by Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, we thought it would be a good time to revisit the perennial question, is Barbie Jewish? The simple answer is yes. Her mother, Ruth Handler, was the feisty Jewish co-founder of Mattel, along with her husband, Elliot Handler, who invented Hot Wheels. Barbie was named after Ruth and Elliot's daughter, Barbara, and Ken was named after their son, Kenneth. But we're talking about toys, not people. So maybe Jewish by birth doesn't really apply. Or does it? I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Cool Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios.
Our special guest today is Helene Siegel, a Los Angeles food writer who runs the Pastry Sessions blog. She's the author of 40 cookbooks, including the Totally Cookbook series and Pure Chocolate. In the early 90s, Helene produced a series of Barbie books for 8 to 12-year-old girls in a time before gender neutrality, including the Barbie Party Cookbook. Helene, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So I had read that you had outgrown dolls by the time Barbie was introduced in 1959. Then 30 years later, you got a job with Mattel producing Barbie books. You write that your friends were shocked at how quickly you set aside your, quote, feminist ideals and dove into channeling the empty-headed fashion model. Could you tell us more about this?
First of all, it was 1959 when she was introduced. And I didn't get to play with her only because I was 9 years old. And I was past dolls. By the time I was in college, I was one of those, I totally latched onto feminism. And I was like, I burned my bra. I marched on Fifth Avenue with Gloria Steinem. So as a college student, I just saw this little sign up somewhere that said, Women's Liberation Meeting happening this afternoon. And I ran to it. And I was like, ooh, this is all true. I know this is real, blah, blah, blah. So I take myself seriously, but I was never an academic the way some of the women who really dug much deeper, I would say, than I did, and wrote very, very serious books. And so what I'm saying is I take my feminism seriously, but I didn't take Barbie seriously. I didn't have a problem with doing the series at all. But my friends, some of them are kind of snooty, kind of left-wing, granola-crunching, good friends of mine. Political, kind of political people. And they took offense because they didn't want their daughters to play with Barbie.
Would you tell us a little bit about the Barbie book series and maybe how you got started on it or what it's all about?
Well, sure. It was a book club for girls, like a mail order book club. So once they signed up, like they signed up at school, and they got new books like every month. That's why we had to work very fast for 2 years. And I was invited basically because the publisher was East Coast publisher Grolier in Connecticut. And they had a contract with Mattel to do this with the license, the Barbie license. They needed a representative on the West Coast because Mattel demands a lot of collaboration, shall we say. So there's approval process on the story, on the photography, by the way, which was fun because I went to we did photorealistic shoots at the studio in Southern California, and that was really fun. So they needed a representative here to show Mattel that they were so careful watching everything. And then I hired a team of writers and editors all over the country because in order to do this, you had to work so fast. And they came, by the way, I had a career in children's book publishing. So I was an expert in many things, food and children's publishing. I was the publisher of a company that specialized in children's pop-up books. And that was here in Los Angeles. And so there's the connection.
People are sometimes surprised to learn that the creator of Barbie, the blonde, Aryan, feminine ideal who's based on a German sexy doll intended as a gag gift for men, was in fact Ruth Handler, a very highly driven, ahead of her time Jewish woman, maybe even a feminist, who was a far cry from the 1950s homemaker stereotype that Barbie sort of emulated in those early days. Did you know about this aspect of Barbie when you were getting involved with Mattel? Did that help kind of ease the transition into that world?
I did know the story of Ruth Handler, and I knew she was Jewish, and I knew that the toy industry that she came up in was also sort of a Jewish industry. I had a little experience with toys. So I don't know how much that influenced me. Frankly, I guess what I thought is that Ruth was very, very smart, and she was in it to win it. And she knew that the glamorous, the most glamorous women of the day were Marilyn Monroe and Brigitte Bardot, and they were blonde, and they had big breasts and small waists, and they were sort of a masculine ideal of a female. And she just wanted to make money. I mean, I think it's as simple as, and I think she probably did good work with the money some of the money she made. I'm sure she did.
Right. And there's that idea that is floated in the movie as well. And I've heard it many times, that this was the first doll, mainstreamed, marketed for kids that was not a baby, right? That was actually a woman.
Yeah. No, at the time it was really, I didn't play with one, but I was kind of titillated by it because one of my friends who was maybe more immature got a doll, and she had like the dream house, which was a big thing where I was growing up in the Bronx, because we lived in small apartments and there weren't a lot of girls who had the dream house and the Corvette and all that. And I mean, I think I kind of wanted to touch the doll. It was because we were just entering puberty. I'm like, what is this? It looked good. I mean, I have to say that what she had looked good. The car, the apartment or the house. It looked great. It looked like fun.
So I think this has been sort of simmering for a little bit. Barbie has not always been seen as a feminist role model. "I am not a Barbie doll" was chanted by protesters at the 1970 Women's Strike for Equality in New York. Barbie's image has changed over the years, with the doll taking on diverse shapes, colors, causes, personas, and occupations. In your Barbie books, were you able to introduce any complexities that maybe helped push Barbie in this direction?
Well, first of all, I have to say that the word complex, to me, does not equate with the word Barbie, because to me, it's a very simple idea. When I worked on it, and now it's evolved some, but when I worked on her, she was perfect. She never had a problem. There's no problem Barbie can't solve. She looks gorgeous in every picture. And she gets to have like a million careers. She didn't have to get a PhD. She never got rejected at a job interview. I mean, she goes to the top like immediately at everything from ice skating to parachuting. And she also has, according in the books we did, she had a heart of gold. So she was also always helping the poor little girl who was maybe like overweight, or her parents were divorcing, was going through a hard time. So in the stories, we tried to interest, 8 to 12-year-old girls with a real story. But she is almost like a unicorn Barbie, or just a magic figure, because, like she has a magic wand. And once Barbie meets the little girl and had a problem, she makes it go away. And I think I love that. It's not complicated.
Right. And I'm sure that you didn't have much say in terms of that aspect of those stories. You were told by Mattel, which is a very sort of finely tuned corporate entity, you have to do it this way. But you said that you kind of like that aspect of it. Is it escapism, or is it something more for these young girls who are maybe reading these books or playing with the dolls?
Well, honestly, I think we made the books because the word Barbie sells books. But the good goal, the healthy goal, was for give children something that they want to read. So, I mean, their stories we hope pertain to their lives, like the divorcing, But they also reflected the issues of the day, because I have to laugh right now. But we had a disability Barbie. Well, I mean, she's a coach, but she's the girl's in a wheelchair. So they were trying to do everything correct, and we had to hire a Hollywood disability consultant. But the funniest one was when there was a doll who was also in a wheelchair, but Barbie was going to teach her how to ski. And that was when I felt they went like too far out. So here's the thing. We came up with the ideas. So I had a team of writers, and we pitched, we came up with the ideas, and they said yes or no. But just as when you channel any licensed character or make-believe character, that stands to make a lot of money. If they don't give you a Bible, the company that says he does this, He doesn't do that. He'll never say this, blah, blah, blah. I think you have to just know it instinctually from the culture. And anything you do that breaks out of that mold, they will reject. It's very simple.
Along those lines, I just rewatched a really interesting episode of the Netflix show, The Toys That Made Us, about Barbie, which...
Documentary?
Yeah, a little documentary. It's a documentary series on the history behind a lot of these really important toy properties. And it did mention that, like, the good, positive decisions that have been made in the Barbie line at Mattel over the years have been women behind those good ideas. And then some of the flops and the weirder things have been the male executives kind of trying to imagine what girls might want, or it's a real disconnect. I don't know if you saw any of that.
I didn't. But when I was working there, this was in the 90s. And by the way, I wasn't hired by Mattel, just for the record. I was with the publisher on the East Coast. They hired me because they needed a West Coast person. It was female executives then. It was a female CEO. And the women running, like, the meetings I went to were on the more creative side, because it was about getting them to approve our story ideas, and then costumes and things like that. It was all women. And frankly, yeah, they were tough. I mean, it wasn't like, come on, by now we all know that women work in industries and they can be just as tough as men. I don't think they were getting orders from any men on top. And so the movie got that wrong, but it's very simple in the movie.
I view the movie, and we'll get to some movie-specific things soon, but I view the movie as really a live-action cartoon in that way, where everyone is a caricature by design. And, we could be very critical of these aspects, but I think in terms of cartoons and caricature and the immediacy of understanding who this character is, that certainly comes through in the movie in a not so complex way, but there are some like deeper themes that are hidden beneath that superficiality. This may be controversial, but I have to admit that the classic Barbie doll, with her blonde hair, her little nose, and that swimsuit figure, sort of looks like the 1960s Jewish suburban ideal, with rhinoplasty being so common and blonde hair and blue eyes being idealized for better or worse. Of course, blonde Jews aren't so uncommon anymore through, Jews by choice and intermarriage and so forth and so on. But in your opinion, even that idealized Barbie of the early days, does that seem like a Jewish doll to you?
Absolutely not. I never thought about it, but I think the doll is secular. If there's one theme that has never come up, is anything to do with any church or religious, anything to do with religion. I don't even remember whether we did a Christmas story, but I don't think we did. I think the one we did was set in colonial America, and they were trying to say whatever, tell them that the British were coming. Barbie was telling people the British were coming. Now, here's my answer, because I've thought about this. I never thought about it before, but frankly, I hate to say it, I don't think she's Jewish. I don't know any doubt in my mind. But if she were a Jew, a Jewish woman of that period, unfortunately, she would be the stereotypical Jap, which I hate to say because I would never use that word. The Jewish American princess, because everything Barbie has is the best. She must have the best. And I mean, honestly, she's a very ambitious striver. But she seems to hardly have to break a sweat. That's what makes her not Jewish. And before the movie, she never worried about anything, and she certainly never cried. And that doesn't seem very Jewish either. There's no dark past. She's in the moment, and she just wants the best of everything. And if she can go to Bloomingdale's, it's a good day.
So we talked about Ruth Handler a bit, and, we're trying to keep this spoiler free, but Ruth Handler's ghost, who apparently lives on the 17th floor of the Mattel building, makes an appearance in the movie. I will say that it was refreshing to see her played by a Jewish actress, Rhea Perlman. That's very rare, and there's a lot of criticism around actors being cast who are not Jewish playing Jewish roles. In fact, the other movie that's big now, Oppenheimer himself, a Jew played by an Irish actor, Cillian Murphy. So that I thought was delightful and refreshing. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the portrayal of Ruth Handler, who I was happy to see in the film, but, it's a version of her.
I know, and I feel like I'm so critical. I'm such a critical Jew. But, honestly, I was really bothered by her. But it was interesting because a lot of my friends, and I think my husband, were like, oh, it was so nice. There was Ruth, a little Jewish lady. And I guess I'm a stickler, and I kind of have a hunch of the kind of person she was. Because I think Ruth was out of the house. She built a giant corporation. She was in boardrooms. And I think Rhea Perlman was very cute and a sort of stereotypical, maybe, Jewish grandma. And even the little advice, the shtick felt for me, didn't do justice to who I think she was.
Yeah, and I think, she mentions, which is, again, nice that they were able to slip it in. She mentioned tax evasion and such, and that's a big part of Ruth Handler's story. But the real Ruth was ruthless. That's the reputation, right?
Well, there's no question. I don't know the personal stories, but there's no doubt in my mind, having worked in some competitive industries, that you have to be. You can't rise to that level. And certainly the women I knew at Mattel who were at a very high level, it's like Hollywood. They're tough, of course. I don't think she just wasn't that person. And I kind of hated that whole nostalgic thing. So I don't know. I wasn't crazy about it, but a lot of people, I know my friends were like, oh, this is very sweet. And she's giving Barbie advice. I think whatever it is, I don't even remember. You don't have to be perfect, maybe.
I'm wondering too, with the work that you did on those books, if you saw any influence or any direct connection with the stories that you were hired to do reflected in the film in any way.
Well, the funny part for me, because I did that cookbook, that Total Barbie Cookbook, and I just gave them my recipes. Obviously, Barbie didn't give them to me. But what has interested me was the change in Barbie through the years from the time I worked on it. Because one of the things I'll never forget is that when I worked on the storybook series, where we had to come up with 1 million careers and we were like running out of ideas. And I wanted to do, what was her name? Mrs. Fields Cookie, kind of a ripoff of Mrs. Fields, a cookie entrepreneur lady. And now they have a doll. They have several Cupcake Barbie, Cookie Barbie, who are entrepreneurs. But back in the day, when I worked on this, they killed that story idea. And I'll never forget what they said, the executives at Mattel to me was, there are some things Barbie will never do. And she will never sweep a floor. She will never wash a pot. And she didn't say it this way, but she's never near schmutz. Okay? No dirt, and no sweeping, and no cooking. And the other thing is she will never get married. So if you ever ask, what happens with her and Ken? Like nothing. That's a part of the myth. The myth with Ken has not changed. But the cooking thing, oh my God, I was shocked when I looked recently. There's almost like 10 different cooking Barbies in a little chef jacket, not a low-cut gown.
Are you tempted to purchase one of those Barbies?
Well, no, because I don't play with dolls. But my granddaughter is, now she's 11. But when she was growing up, when she was littler, I had these collectible Barbies from when I worked on it. But when I worked on her, we made some special editions. And they were very special at the time. One was like a ball gown for going to the masked ball in Venice, where there was a stolen jewel, and she was like, you got to sleuth it out. Okay, so I saved them for my granddaughter. And when I gave them to her, she was just being kind to me, I guess. Was, oh, very nice, Grandma. And from all I know, she just threw them in the closet. She never played with them. And sometimes I say, you remember those Barbies? Or, oh, yeah, I remember. So she could have cared less.
Yeah, my daughter was the same way, actually. We got her a Barbie just to see what would happen, and nothing happened.
And I had sons, and neither of them ever asked. I mean, if they asked, we would have had dolls in the house, but they didn't. And I have a friend, I'm just thinking of my friends, these left-leaning, who a couple who felt strongly they didn't want the girls to play with Barbie. But one of them told me that she started getting them as birthday gifts. And what was she going to do? Take the birthday gifts away from her kids? She didn't. And she said, so she just had to kind of zip it up. And her daughter played, and then she got tired of them. And now she's a genius, brilliant, attorney. But it's interesting for the women who had the politics where they really didn't like that, what they would decide. I think it would always be a bad idea, frankly, to forbid a toy. Because you're almost asking for trouble.
Barbie has become much more diverse in the last 20 years or whatever, with the different shapes and sizes and ethnicities and different historical figures that she inhabits and so forth. So there is an awareness that, at least on some level, that stereotypical Barbie, as it's called now, is not tenable in many ways, and that with the diversification of the consumer base and, progress, never perfect, but progress made in, women's choices of career and so forth, that's reflected, I think, very positively in Barbie. I think it's not a terrible thing to have a Barbie doll.
I know, I don't think so either. And a girl is kind of a creative person, and she's maybe interested in fashion and all that. I mean, what's the danger? I mean, she's looking at I was really into the outfits. I thought they were really cool. It reminded me of something. When you talked about diversity. Now, remember, I worked on these in the 1990s, so it was a long time ago. And things have changed. But chubbiness was starting to be, Barbie was being criticized for the bad body image by the feminists and the doctors, etc. And they wanted a chubby story. They wanted more than one, but they wanted to show that Barbie accepted chubbiness. It's called a special ballerina. And you won't be able to tell, but one of these little dolls is considered chubby because her waistline is a tiny bit larger, like in Skipper or whatever. But they were so compromised, like they couldn't really have chubby, you know what I mean? The same thing when they did Curvy Barbie. That was supposed to be the chubbier one, maybe more like Latina or something, but it was very compromised. Maybe not today, but back then in the 90s, they were treading like new territory.
So, Helene, you're a prolific author of cookbooks. Could you tell us about your cooking philosophy and what goes into making a cookbook?
So cookbook, anything to do with food is very hard work. It's like opening a restaurant or opening a bagel shop. It sounds better, in fact, than it is because it's so much work. I mean, I have to say I enjoyed those years. I did it for about 25 years. And my decision to do that was an outgrowth, by the way, of my life at the time where I was working full-time out of the house. And once again, this goes way back. So my first son was born in 1981. Okay. So I was juggling. I had a career in publishing where you had to be at the office every day, 9 to 5. And I had a commute and I had a kid at home. And I wanted to try to figure out how I could, back then, work from home, really at a decent job and still see my kid. I wanted to see my kid. I didn't want to do the commuting. So basically it started with that. And I had a lifelong interest in food. I just like to eat. And I was kind of self-taught as a cook. I mean, I never did cooking school or anything like that. Sort of a typical English major. But it was always a passion. I loved to eat out. And so what happened in the 80s here in California, we had moved from New York, where I had worked in publishing. And in the 80s, there was a big wave of what was called California cuisine. And so food became suddenly very important. And the publishers on the East Coast were looking for chefs on the West Coast to write cookbooks. And so that's how that all happened for me, was I got invited to be the writer for a cookbook that was with the hottest restaurant in town in Los Angeles, like the biggest Hollywood restaurant. It was called Ma Maison. And the chef was Wolfgang Puck, who went on to huge fame. But they couldn't get it together to do the book. They had signed the contract and gotten a bunch of money because they were busy, like doing a restaurant, right? It's a lot of work in the cookbook. So that's how I entered that field. I got hired for my editorial skills. But what happened is, as a result of that, they put me in a kitchen with a real chef for about a year. So I almost had private cooking lessons, and they were like really great chefs and recipes, and I loved it. So then I became a full-on, and that's when I wrote my own books. I developed this expertise, and I would occasionally be hired, like for my chocolate book, Pure Chocolate, is with a real chocolatier who owns a business in Seattle, and I did the writing, she did the cooking. So basically, when I do my own books, it's a crazy amount of work. I mean, I can't really recommend this as a profession. When I was doing it, I'll just say at the height of it, because I was writing them really fast, I would test about 4 recipes a day, which meant early in the morning, very early, I would go shopping. It was like every day was a dinner party at my house. Because I would have to work like a caterer, basically, cooking and taking notes or recording details, like all day long. And then my family had to eat. I mean, that was kind of funny because whatever I was working on is what they ate at night. And it was really some crazy food. My philosophy for now, after many, many years, and I stopped writing cookbooks, is for my home cooking, which I do love cooking still, is to keep, for home cooks, to cook simply. Do what you know, occasionally try something new, but don't labor too much over these crazy recipes, that have like 28 ingredients. I mean, I've heard about that. Like, I'm a follower of like Ottolenghi. I don't know if you know his cookbooks. They're Middle Eastern, he's Israeli, the food is Middle Eastern. And I mean, they're just like 3 pages long. And I think it's great for him, and some people like it, but I don't recommend that.
For our audience's sake, what's the best place to get started if someone would want to delve into your world of cooking?
Here's my recommendation. I did a blog, it's still up, called the Pastry Sessions. It's just called the pastrysessions.com. And it is all baking. I love baking. And I did baking classes with my granddaughter during COVID. So she lives in Austin. We did it on Zoom. And they're cute little essays. But the thing is, these recipes are the standard things that people like. Brownies, homemade fudge sauce, strawberry shortcake, things that you can get your kids to participate in. Basically, I see it also as a family activity. And just to go back, part of the reason that it became my profession is that I wanted to be home to make dinner for my family. I would just find a few authors. If you know what kind of food you want to cook, like let's say Italian, you would start with a woman named Marcella Hazan. If it's Jewish, maybe Claudia Rodin. This food is Middle Eastern and not too complicated, I don't think. Just keep it easy. This is great stuff for free online. I would say the New York Times is my favorite in terms of their recipes.
Well, thank you so much, Helene, for joining us.
Well, you're welcome.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.